Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Since 1960, there are only a handful of coaches to make it to the NFL Championship or the Super Bowl in 3 consecutive years. This is an extremely selective list. You have Bill Belichick, who did it with the Patriots from 2016 to 18. You have Marv Levy, who did it with the Bills from 1990 to 93. You have Don Shula, who did it with the Dolphins from 1971 to 73. You have Vince Lombardi, who amazingly enough did this twice in the 1960s. And there's one other guy to do it. That coach was a man by the name of Allie Sherman. Allie Sherman was a fine coach. You can make a legitimate argument that even though he never actually won a championship, he deserves to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. However, unless you retire on top, public perception eventually begins to turn on you. No matter how successful you are, and no matter how many accolades you have won, at the end of the day, the NFL is a what have you done for me lately kind of league. And past history can only get you so far in the public eye. Because there was a moment where the fans completely turned on Allie Sherman, and went from singing his praises to wanting him on the next plane out of LaGuardia. In 1966, one play happened that was so bad that it single-handedly changed Sherman's legacy forever. And this is the story behind the moment that the Giants fans turned on Allie Sherman. Before I talk about this exact moment, we need some context leading up to the moment to understand just who Allie Sherman is, and why the fans were ready to turn on him. After Jim Lee Howell retired as the head coach of the Giants following the 1960 season, the Giants decided to hire Allie Sherman as their next head coach. The move made a ton of sense on paper. He was the team's offensive coordinator in 1959 and 1960, and during that 1959 season, the Giants had the second best offense in all of football. Plus, he was the head coach of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the CFL for 4 years, and finished above 500 there while leading Winnipeg to a Grey Cup appearance in 1953. He was a proven man, and he seemed like a safe hire. Sherman took over as the head coach of the Giants in 1961, and early on, things were looking great for New York. In 1961, the Giants went 10-3-1, making it to the NFL Championship, where they lost to the Green Bay Packers. Sherman followed that up in 1962 by leading the Giants to a 12-2 record and another appearance in the NFL Championship, where they once again lost to the Green Bay Packers. Over both of those seasons, Sherman was named the Coach of the Year by the Associated Press, becoming the first two-time winner of this award ever. And for what it's worth, the 12 wins that the Giants had in 1962 was the most wins they had in a season since 1930. In 1963, Sherman won his third straight conference title, and even though he lost again in the NFL Championship, this time to the Chicago Bears, he had done what very few people in NFL history had ever accomplished. To make it to 3 straight championship games is nothing short of remarkable. Sherman was awarded with a contract extension, and then after the 1964 season, despite a poor 2-10-2 record, was awarded a 10-year extension. The long-term deal, worth somewhere in the ballpark of $40,000 a year, was so good that Sherman said, "I think any coach in the business would envy me today." And yes, some fans did turn on Sherman after that disastrous 1964 campaign, and some turned on him in 1965 after the team finished 7-7. However, for the most part, everyone was on board the Allie Sherman train. You're not going to jump ship on a guy that's guided you to 3 straight championship appearances. That all changed in 1966. The New York Giants have had many bad seasons in their franchise's history. The 2017 season was laughably bad. Bill Parcells' first season in 1983 was a chaotic mess. The seasons where they played at Yale were awful, especially in 1973, which I talked about in a previous video of mine. And you can learn more about that disaster of the year by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But perhaps the worst season of them all was 1966. Because in 1966, it was clear that the Giants were not good, and maybe that 10-year contract to Allie Sherman was a mistake. You could make a legitimate argument for the 1966 Giants being the worst defensive team in NFL history. They allowed over 35 points per game. Not only was that obviously the worst total in the league, but it was so bad that only one other team in football allowed 26 points per game or more. The Giants were averaging about a touchdown per game worse than just about every other team in football. Among the lowlights include 52 points to the Dallas Cowboys in Week 2, 55 points to the Los Angeles Rams in Week 10, 49 points to the Cleveland Browns in Week 13, and of course, 72 points allowed to Washington in Week 12. For some perspective, from Weeks 12 to 13, the Giants scored 81 points, which is incredible. They went 0-2. Through the first 13 weeks of the season, the Giants won a grand total of 1 game, which was a 13-10 victory against Washington in Week 6. They were somehow worse than the Atlanta Falcons, an expansion team given absolutely nothing to work with in that first year. By this point, most of the fans were on the Sherman out train, as evidenced by their 31-3 loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, when the fans begged Sherman to play Gary Wood over Earl Morrall at the quarterback position. Side note, if you told fans back then watching Morrall play at the age of 32 that he would play another 10 seasons in the NFL after that, I think they would have called you crazy. And by this point, the rumor mill was circling. There was speculation that Sherman was going to be canned just 2 years after his 10-year extension, and that the Giants would be in the market for a new head coach. One report said that the legendary Giants quarterback Y.A. Tittle was being considered for the head coaching job. While he didn't confirm this, he didn't outright deny it either, saying it isn't proper for me to discuss it because the Giants have a coach, which is a fantastic non-answer. Still, the front office was confident in Sherman, with Maris saying before the team's penultimate game against the Pittsburgh Steelers that Sherman was going to stay on, that ticket sales were still great, that there wasn't a better coach on the market, and that this poor season was not Sherman's fault. But if there were any holdovers who believed in Sherman's coaching abilities and wanted him to remain as the team's head coach, not even 48 hours later, they were nowhere to be found, because Sherman's legacy and reputation was about to be shattered. December 11th, 1967. We're at Yankee Stadium for this game between the New York Giants and the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a rematch of a tied game from Week 1 where both teams drew 34 all. And it's obvious that neither one of these teams are any good. New York enters this game at 1-10-1, having lost 10 of their last 11 games. Pittsburgh enters this game at 3-8-1, having lost 8 of their last 10 games. This is completely meaningless, but obviously, the fans making the trek to the Bronx want to see their team do well. Instead, it was very obvious right off the bat that this was not going to happen. The Giants never held the lead at any point in the game. Anytime you're starting the game with your punter, who's also your defensive back, dropping the ball out of the back of the end zone for a safety, you know you're in for an absolute treat. Pittsburgh led 12-0 in the second quarter after a 13-yard touchdown pass by Bill Nelson, then they tacked on another touchdown and led 19-14 at the half. The Giants' defense, which was notoriously bad, was on full display today with their ineptitude, and that would continue in the third quarter. Willie Asbury punched it in from a yard out to make it 26-14. Then he did it again to make it a 33-14 game. With the game being 3 possessions now, there was practically no shot with how bad New York's defense was if they were going to get back into this. After a 66-yard touchdown to end the quarter from Bill Nelson to Cannonball Butler made it 40-21, the way the fourth quarter started off was laughably bad. For starters, on 4th down, the Steelers were lining up for a field goal. Dick Hoke couldn't get the snap down in time, so he decided to take off and run. Hoke picked up the first down. Embarrassing play for the Giants. You thought you were going to make a stop, you're getting bailed out, and now the drive is extended. But what if I told you that a minute later, that happened again? Because after Dick Leffridge ran it in from 2 yards out to make it 46-21 and officially put the game out of reach, the Steelers lined up for the extra point. And once again, Dick Hoke can't get the snap down, so he decides to throw it to Andy Russell in a moment of pure desperation. And somehow, this actually works. The Steelers score the incredibly rare 1-point conversion and they lead it 47-21. At that moment, everything changed. Because after that laughably bad play, and after that embarrassing display on special teams not once, but twice on the same drive within a minute of each other, not a single Giants fan still wanted Allie Sherman coaching the team. Because this was the moment that the Giants turned on Sherman. After that play, for the rest of the day, Yankee Stadium became a hostile environment. Because after that play, which one writer called the final straw, the fans' objective was to be heard loud and clear. You had chants of Fire Allie blasting throughout the stadium. Fans began waving banners saying goodbye Allie, and they chanted it as well. When they got tired of chanting that, they sang, saying hang down your head, Coach Sherman, hang down your head and cry. One writer even said that after that sequence, from the fake field goal to the fake extra point, fans who weren't booing and chanting were audibly laughing, and that it could be heard throughout the venue. The Giants lost this game 47-28, and even though Allie Sherman somehow stayed on board after the season, his reputation with the fans never recovered. Over the ensuing 2 years, while the Giants weren't as bad as they were in 1966, as they did go 7-7 both times, it was a far cry from their time in the late 50s and early 60s, where they were consistently amongst the giants of the league, pun completely intended. Following that 1-12-1 season in 1966, where the Giants set a franchise record for fewest wins and most losses, Sherman would not return in 1969. It's always fascinating in NFL history when you can pinpoint exact turning moments, and when you can identify quite clearly the moment that a reputation changed, for better or worse. And of all things, even though Sherman's reputation was already trending downward, the straw that broke the camel's back was an extra point. Even if the majority of the fans were leaning in the Sherman out direction before, after that extra point there was absolutely no going back. There was no doubt anymore, for that extra point was the moment that the New York Giants, despite 3 championship appearances in 3 years, turned on head coach Allie Sherman. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Monday and Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for a chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9 and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.